All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope all of you guys have had a great week. It's Mailbag Day. Lots of good questions from you guys. Remember, if you want to get your questions into next week's Mailbag, drop them in the YouTube comments throughout the week underneath these videos. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Don't forget, it's also helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. We also have brand new social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where we're releasing content throughout the year. And then last but not least, as I mentioned off the top, keep dropping the mailbag questions in those YouTube comments so we can keep hitting them on Fridays. All right, let's talk some basketball. I had 2 or 3 people leave very similar questions along these lines, and this is a topic that I haven't had a chance to get to yet, so today's as good a day as any. First question. More and more people, Nick Wright, Bill Simmons, etc., are advocating for a change of rules to make the NBA a better TV product. What's your take on that? Do you think the analytical approach leading to always more threes endangers the game we love? Thank you so much for your work. It's always been a pleasure to watch your videos. Good day from Australia. Thank you so much for supporting the show. So there's 3 fronts that I want to get into here. 1, the TV ratings. 2, rule changes. And 3, what about all of these three-pointers that we're seeing around the league? So let's take them one at a time. 1, the ratings. There are a lot of reasons why NBA ratings are down. Anytime you're dealing with an entity like the NBA that is as large and as complicated as it is, there's just too many moving parts to kind of like try to point it at one particular issue, right? And that's been one of the annoying things for me is I think there have been a lot of people out. I'm not calling anybody in particular out, but there have been a lot of people out there that I feel like are taking this issue as a vehicle with which to hammer at a specific narrative or something along those lines. I think that's silly. And quite frankly, I think a lot of people are glossing over what I think is the obvious reason ratings are down, which is that there's just an urgency problem. The NBA has a massive inventory, right? There's 82 regular season games. But in addition to that, we also let 20 of the 30 teams into the NBA playoffs, right? And like what ends up happening as a result of that is like you can play bad basketball sometimes for weeks on end, and it just doesn't matter. I watched a Lakers team go off to a 2-10 start and then make it to the Western Conference Finals. I've seen lots of teams have really bad stretches of basketball, and it just doesn't matter. It's a fundamental difference between the NBA and the NFL, for instance, where you have a bad couple of weeks, it could ruin your whole season. Like kind of what's happening to the Atlanta Falcons this year, right? Like get off to a 6-3 start, then you drop 4 games in a row and suddenly things look very different, right? Like you have a bad 4-game stretch in the NBA, it literally means nothing. Like you guys know I'm off the Lakers this year as a championship contender, but like theoretically, they could still get into a 6 or 7 seed, get out of the play-in, maybe win a play-in game and have a chance, right? Like everyone has a chance in the NBA. It's never too late to turn things around in the NBA. I remember Brian Windhorst did that whole speech about his like major takeaways since he's been covering the NBA. And one of his big takeaways was it's never too late. You want to know why it's never too late? Because we play 82 games and we let 20 of the 30 NBA teams in. Now, here's the thing. That's always been a problem in the NBA. Even when it was 82 games and 16 teams instead of 20. It was still more or less the same issue. What has changed, though? What has changed from when Michael Jordan was in the league and ratings were at their peak versus now? What has changed? All that has changed in terms of the surrounding circumstances are the sheer volume of options that people have to watch other things. I'm a diehard basketball fan. Even myself with a smartphone now, it's like, oh, Trae Young went over the top of that screen and jumped backwards into the guy. Now he's going to the foul line. I have 30 seconds. Let me get on my phone. I might, text one of my buddies or talk shit on Twitter or scroll on Instagram, right? Like there's just so much media at our fingertips that like there's a lot less incentive to watch an NBA game that doesn't really matter in the big picture. And so, like, the real reason why the NBA's ratings are down while the NFL ratings are still up is the NFL has a massive urgency factor, and the NBA simply does not. And so, as over the years, as our options and the sheer amount of different content out there that we can consume has been available, casual fans, not us, guys, we're going to watch basketball no matter what because we're basketball fans. We're diehard basketball fans. But the casual NBA fan has less incentive than ever to watch a random regular season game because there's just other stuff that they can watch. And the point is like there are tons of factors. Like, does the fact that the top 4 players in the league are all international players, does that play a role? I think so. I think if there was a couple bigger American stars, I think there would be more enthusiasm. I absolutely think that sort of thing could play a role. Like, are there issues with officiating? Like, yeah, absolutely. Are there issues with the way the league is covered and the way that we market players? Yeah, absolutely. All of these little things factor in, but I think the obvious big thing that everyone's glossing over is like there's just a lot of shit to watch, and the NBA an NBA regular season game just doesn't matter all that much. Like why do we watch the NBA as regular season fans? We watch for moments. Last night, I'm recording this on a Tuesday. When I was watching that Kings Nuggets game, or I was watching like a Heat Pistons game earlier tonight. Like when you catch like a really entertaining regular season game, it feels like a treat. We hang out for the moments, man. Like Jokic and Sabonis just had a great battle. LeBron and Steph just had a great battle. You know, Luka and Shea just had a great battle. Like we're watching for those moments because we're big fans. But in terms of like the casual fan, they can kind of consume that moment as an Instagram reel or as a YouTube video or just watch the box score, see a few highlights. They feel like they get the gist of it, and they don't really need to start paying super close attention to their team until they get to April because they're probably going to be there. No matter how unbalanced their season is, no matter how often they look good or look bad, they're probably going to be playing in April because we let 20 of the 30 teams in. See what I'm saying? So like, again, the topic number 1, the TV ratings, there's a lot of people saying a lot of things. You know, like I saw someone say like, oh, it's because of inside the NBA. I disagree. I think that the urgency surrounding the NBA in the competitive media environment we live in plays a much bigger role, okay? The second piece of it, rules changes. There are some fun ideas out there. You know, getting rid of corner threes, making dunks worth 3 points. That's the big one Nick Wright talks about. I, as a basketball fan, think that'd be fun. Like, it'd be fun to watch, like, rim confrontations that have that much value. It just will never happen because, one, it'll lead to a lot of injuries as guys are flying into each other at the basket. And then the second piece of it is it's like a little too subjective, right? Like what counts as a dunk is like it's a little bit subjective, and I think that would get complicated. There'd be reviews. It would just be difficult, right? So I think there are some reasons why that wouldn't happen. But like, yeah, we think about how it'd be fun. It'd be fun to do this rule change. It'd be fun to do that rule change. Let's just say that Adam Silver conceptualizes a rule change. I'm not even going to talk about what it is, but just this. Imagine this theoretical rule change that makes the game more fun. That still doesn't solve the problem that there's 82 games and 20 of the 30 teams get in. Like, it's still, at the end of the day, is an urgency problem. And then the last piece of this question, the 3-point shooting. I tend to think that there's a nostalgia element with this sort of thing. Like, we're complaining about the 3-point shooting now. But the truth of the matter is if I actually made you guys sit down and watch a December slate in 2014... or in 2004, or in 1994, I have a feeling you're going to watch a lot of bad basketball in that slate. We just, as a result of us having the internet at our fingertips and our ability to like bitch and moan in public, has made it like more of a public topic. But the truth of the matter is like ever since the beginning of basketball, anytime there's been a league, there have been teams that played good basketball and teams that play bad basketball. Excuse me. So, like, the truth of the matter is, as it pertains to the threes, there are teams out there that take a lot of bad threes, but there are also teams out there that take a lot of good threes. Like, the Celtics take the most threes in the NBA. When I watch the Celtics, I like the way that they play. I think it's aesthetically appealing. I was talking with my buddy Combo. He had me on his Good Drill podcast on Tuesday earlier this week. And he was asking me the same question. And one of the things that I talked about was like, let's, all of you guys who actually play in some capacity, whether it's you play with your men's league, you play pickup, or you played in college or whatever it is. When you are on the floor and like you beat someone off the dribble and you throw a nice kick out pass as you draw and help. And then that guy drives and he draws help and makes another kick out pass to the guy who makes an extra pass to the corner and he's wide open and he knocks down a three. It's such a great feeling. You're high-fiving each other on the way up the floor. You're like, great pass, great drive, great kick. It's like an infectious thing when you move the ball around and get a great three-point shot. The same goes as a fan. When you're watching your favorite team, like Warriors fans, when you're watching and Steph draws two at the level and he drops it off to Draymond and like he hits Kuminga cutting out of the baseline, but another guy helps and he swings it out to the corner and there's Buddy Hield and he knocks down a three. It feels great, both as a fan and as a player. But then there are a lot of bad threes getting taken. The classic one that I see a lot is like the early clock semi-contested above the break three after a swing pass. Like, okay, I'm coming off a ball screen. There's a little bit of nail help. I just swing it over to the right and the guy just takes like a moderately contested three with like 25 seconds on the shot clock. Or excuse me, like 25 feet from the basket, but like 15 seconds on the shot clock. When that happens, if it doesn't go in, it kind of feels like bad basketball, right? Like when you're playing with your buddies and someone takes an early three, like even if it's kind of open, sometimes you're like, man, like we could have moved it around a little bit. Like it just felt like we didn't have any rhythm and flow. Same thing happens when you're a fan. You can feel it. You can feel it. It's like that government definition of porn. It's like you know it when you see it. That's kind of the way it is. When you see a bad shot, you kind of are just like, like I feel like we could have done a little better. Like we can get a moderately contested three 7 seconds later and it's no issue. There are a lot of teams in the league, or I should say a few teams in the league, that are taking a lot of that type of three. And that is bad basketball. But again, at the top of the league, there's a lot of teams that take a lot of threes that do it in a very pretty way, in a way that is aesthetically appealing, in a way that is infectious for their team, in a way that I do consider to be good basketball. And so again, what I think is happening is we're seeing the bad basketball that's being played by some of the teams in the league, and we're constantly complaining about it. But the truth of the matter is there were 5 to 10 teams playing really bad basketball in 2014. Same thing goes in 2004, and the same thing goes in 1994. I think it's a lot of nostalgia, a lot of like it's mid-December and we're just coming up with stuff to talk about. Why? Because there's not a lot of urgency, because like we talked about off the top, there's 82 games and 20 of the 30 teams get in. So like my thing is like the real thing that's going to fix all these problems is shorten the season, and they're never going to shorten the season. So we have to appreciate the NBA for what it is, which is an inventory sport. That's the difference between the NBA and the NFL. The NFL is an urgency sport. The NBA is an inventory sport. Even though the NBA ratings are so much lower than the NFL's, the revenue that the NBA generates is considerably closer relative to the NFL compared to the rating situation. Why? Because they have a huge international footprint and they're great at monetizing the impressions that come from the NBA in all of the inventory that they have. There's just so many highlights and moments that they can get into because we do play 82 games. And so again, we got to just kind of accept the NBA for what it is, an inventory sport that's never going to have a great deal of urgency during the regular season. The only people that are really going to be watching it night in, night out are people like us. But that doesn't mean the league isn't in a healthy spot. That's the thing. Like, don't confuse a ratings dip with an unhealthy league. Those are two very different things. The NBA has a ratings dip. They just signed a massive new TV deal. There were a lot of people. I remember Clay Travis bitching about it nonstop. Oh, this NBA rights bubble, it's going to blow up. It's going to blow up. He was saying that 10 years ago. Here we are. We got another massive deal. So like I'm not particularly concerned about it. I think that there's an urgency issue, but I think that same urgency issue has been there since the beginning, and all that really has changed is we just have more options, and the NBA is losing out on some of that attention. But I still think that the NBA is in a very, very healthy spot. It's the most wonderful time of the year for getting in on all of the hoops, football, and hockey action at DraftKings Sportsbook. In the season of giving, we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too. Almost 24/7. So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. Current Super Bowl winners on DraftKings right now. The Detroit Lions at plus 260 and the Kansas City Chiefs at plus 425. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, let's move on to our next question. My question actually involves KD. He's my favorite player of all time, so my opinion on him might be slightly biased. But like yourself, I try to stay as objective as possible. I've heard you call him a slightly above average defender before. I've also heard you say players like Steph are slightly above average. I just want to know how you defend that. Kevin Durant can do everything on defense, which schematically is a coach's dream. You want to run small ball. KD is capable of playing center as long as the opposing center doesn't have a deep post bag. You want to play drop. He's more than capable of playing on the perimeter. He's also one of the best help defenders in the league. You've said this several times yourself. He's capable of being in two places at once, protecting the rim and recovering to the corner. He's, in my opinion, a pretty damn good one-on-one defender. So if you want to switch him, he's more than capable. I just don't see how Steph and him are comparable on the defensive end. Yes, Steph has improved from his earlier years as a defender. However, with his physical limitations, he's simply not capable of impacting the defensive end the way that KD can. So a couple of things, like I think KD and Steph are two very, very different types of defensive players. Like Steph to me is a very limited defensive player in terms of his athletic traits, but a guy that has competed on that end at a much higher level than most small guards in the league. And so he has become a slightly above average defender. Kevin Durant has the physical tools to be Anthony Davis or close. Maybe not Anthony Davis, but close in terms of his length and his ability to be in multiple places at once. At many points in his career, he has demonstrated that, but it hasn't been an area where he's devoted the majority of his resources, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, there's a version of KD's career where he obsessively commits to the defensive end, and he's the best two-way player in the league. But instead, he kind of over-indexed on offense, and he still has had a top 12 career in history of the NBA. But like, again, like that's the difference. It's like Steph is a guy to me who like had serious limitations on that end and through obsessive work became an above average defender. To me, Kevin Durant is a guy that has tier 1 defensive tools, but just didn't use them all the time throughout his NBA career. For the record, I think he's having an amazing defensive season this year. Hey, Jason, huge fan of the show. I've been watching for a long time, and it's great seeing how the show has been evolving. Being a clinical psychologist, I'm super interested in what's going on with Ben Simmons. Keeping in mind he started off his NBA career as one of the biggest prospects of the last decade and having a lot of success throughout his first years, it's been hard watch to see him decline. To me, it seems as if he's lost all of his confidence in his shooting and even layup ability. On many nights, he looks unplayable on the offensive end due to his lack of willingness to even consider attempting a shot. I was of the impression that each team must have a professional psychologist that specializes in this type of issue, helping athletes get their mind back on track when going through phases like this. Given how much money he makes, the Nets should be super invested in getting him back to being at least some type of offensive threat. But it feels like they have resigned and simply accepted that this is not an area of his game that they will benefit from. Just interested in your thoughts on this. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I don't think the mental aspect has played a role for Ben Simmons. I think it has. But I think the majority of what's gone wrong for Ben Simmons in his career is health. Like, you know, the truth of the matter is it's not really like Ben never learned to shoot or Ben couldn't make layups. The bigger issue is Ben can't move anymore. When Ben was at his peak, he was like one of the most athletically dominant forwards in the league. He was a guy that you would put on the other team's best guard and he could completely shut them down. He was a guy that was like a freight train in transition, kicking out to three-point shooters. He had such an athletically imposing build. And since it's mostly been back stuff and like nerve stuff from what I understand, but since then he just hasn't been as mobile. And I think that has probably affected his skill development. Do I think that Ben would have ever become, a sniper type of shooter? No. But like chances are if he had stayed healthy, he would have had more opportunities over the years to work on his skill and he probably would have become a little bit more of a viable option there. But like to me, by far the biggest impact that led to the derailing of Ben Simmons' career was his injuries, specifically with his back and just how that affected his ability to work on his game. Mailbag, simple request. How are the Mavs shooting above the break three-pointers this season so far? It looks to be better this season, but I don't have the stats to back that up. So, last year as a team, They ranked 7th in the league in above the break 3-point percentage at 37.4%. This year as a team, they're at 38.8%, which ranks 4th in the NBA. So yes, they are a little better than last year. The big one to me, though, is PJ Washington is shooting 49% on above the break threes. You guys might remember in the NBA Finals, that was one of the big things that went wrong for the Mavs, specifically PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. Derrick Jones is gone. Brought in different guys. Klay Thompson and Quentin Grimes are both shooting over 40% on above the break threes this year. But PJ Washington was the guy that they needed. And I talked a lot last summer about how I expected PJ Washington to be in the damn gym all summer working on that above the break jump shot. And he clearly did. 49% is a real positive uptick for him year over year. Can you make an advanced basketball analysis for dummies segment from time to time where you break down situations but explain the concepts or terminology to use in your analysis? So I'd be down to try this, but I like there's just so many different concepts. So what I would like for you guys to do, again, like when you put in your comment, if you put mailbag with a colon at the beginning of the comment, that's like a big shining light that tells me that's a mailbag question, which helps me when I'm scrolling through like 200 comments, right? So like mailbag, and then just put like, can you please explain this? So like if you, hey, can you please explain, you know, how can you please explain how stack pick and roll works? Or can you please explain how, can you please explain what a post split is and how that works? Like if you want me to do that, just put it in the mailbag and just play a mailbag. Can you please explain whatever? And then I will add that as a segment into our mailbag, into our Friday mailbags. I think that's an easy way to do that. And then you guys can direct me into the stuff that you specifically want to see explained. This is one troll, but it's just something I need to clarify. Someone goes, out on the Lakers, you can't be from LA or be a real Lakers fan. I would just assume you are an LBJ fan. Yeah, I was born and raised in Tucson, Arizona. I don't have any loyalty to any NBA team. I root for the Lakers because LeBron James is my favorite player. When I was like early teens, I ended up watching LeBron James playing in the early portion of his career. And watching LeBron, I grew up in a baseball football family, and watching LeBron caused me to fall in love with basketball. And then I also got super lucky and I got super tall, unlike the rest of my family. And like that kind of like sent my life down that trajectory. But like LeBron is the one player in the league right now that I have kind of a sentimental attachment to, simply because he was the guy that literally altered the trajectory of my life. Like I fell in love with the game watching LeBron in 2006 try to take the Pistons down and lose in 7 games. That was when I first started watching him. And then I became a huge basketball fan, but like LeBron has always been like my favorite player, centering around that. Like, again, it happened when I was a kid. So you can imagine there's like a sentimental type of deal there. But yeah, I've been upfront about that from the beginning. Even to Lakers fans. Like, I root for the Lakers because of LeBron. I have no attachment to the Lakers. And when LeBron retires, like, I won't have a single team that I actively emotionally root for. I'll have teams that I like as a fan and dislike as a fan, but like not within the realm of any sort of emotion, if that makes sense. Question for the mailbag. Why is the Lakers GM incompetent and doing absolutely nothing for the Lakers? What is his actual role for the Lakers? So, I do think Rob Pelinka is not very good at his job. Now, I think it's important when you say something like that you explain why. I think there's a lot of like, this guy sucks kind of thing going on where people just say it. And I think it's important when you make that sort of assertion that you back it up with evidence is the wrong word, but provide the reasoning behind your analysis, right? Because evidence is difficult because it's not really... it's a very subjective thing. And so like there's a certain amount of this where it's like, I'm sure if you asked Rob, he would probably make a case that defends all the decisions that he made, right? My case for why I don't think Rob is good at his job centers around the concept of his basketball vision. From the beginning, when Rob first got the job, or I should say after Magic Johnson left, let's zoom in on the LeBron AD era. First, he wants a third star. It doesn't work out. So then he goes and he gets a bunch of these like pretty big athletic role players, right? Like that's the Danny Green, Danny Green. It's, Avery Bradley. It's JaVale McGee. It's Dwight Howard. It's just this like big athletic team, right? And then you're like, okay, well, we want to get another ball handler. So you flip Danny Green for Dennis Schroeder or whatever. But after that season, it's like, now we're flipping all of these role players for Russell Westbrook. And then it's like, now let's try building a team around offense. Here's Malik Monk. Here's Carmelo Anthony. And now there's like no centers or forwards on the roster. And it's like, well, now let's try this. Now let's try that. There's no coherent basketball vision. Like, if you asked me, and I'm not saying that I should be a GM, that's a very, very complicated job. There's a lot more that goes into it. But I have a basketball vision. Like, I have a belief in the way that I think basketball works. And it tweaks slightly as I take on new information each passing year covering the league. But like, I'm a believer that you need to be athletic on the perimeter. You need big, functional athletes on the perimeter because this is a game that is played in space and in transition, right? Like, I don't know what Rob Pelinka's basketball philosophy is because every year he's done something different. And so there's no coherent, like this. I don't know what Rob Pelinka thinks about the game of basketball, which I feel like I should, right? When I watched Boston, I know what Brad Stevens' basketball vision is. He wants guys that can dribble, shoot, pass, and defend on the perimeter. So like even the guys that are like coming off the bench for them, the Sam Hausers and Peyton Pritchards, they guard. They defend. They can play read and react basketball. There is a very specific type of player that you see them go after. Oklahoma City, Sam Presti, same sort of thing. You can tell Sam Presti has a basketball vision and that every draft pick that he brings in seems to fall into that same vision and that same kind of belief system surrounding the game. Golden State, over the last two GMs they've had, there's been a consistent basketball culture, a basketball vision that you see there. The second big thing with Rob is a strategic mistake that again, there's a bunch that you can get into, right? Like there's a boatload of mistakes over the years, like letting Brook Lopez walk for absolutely nothing, letting Julius Randle walk for absolutely nothing, trading all of your best role players for Russell Westbrook was a huge mistake. But even more recently, the idea of, oh, we're going to wait to make the right deal. Well, you've been waiting 2 years to make the right deal, and now LeBron's about to turn 40 instead of turning 38. It's very possible that last year in April, when LeBron was playing like one of the top 3 or 4 players in the league, that was the last time that he will ever be that good. And so any benefit you gained by waiting for the better trade has been undercut by LeBron's older and slower now. Those of you guys who have been watching this show, I have preached that exact same take for years now. What's the point of waiting? Like you might get someone a little better, but LeBron's really good right now. Why aren't we doing this right now? LeBron and AD were playing at such a high level last April. It's very possible that if they had put in their draft picks and made some sort of ceiling raising move, that they make a run. It's very possible. They led the majority of that Nuggets series. 2 Jamal Murray shots turned the series around. I'm not saying they would have beat Denver, but they might have had a much better chance had they been more aggressive last year. So it's been the lack of a coherent basketball vision, tons and tons of mistakes, and then now just the complete botching of the LeBron James tail end of his prime. I think that it's very, very important for the Lakers to have synergy between their coaching staff and their front office. They absolutely need to get Rob Pelinka out of there and get somebody in there that's not an agency figurehead, that's not a personality type, but is rather just a basketball mind, a grinder, someone who has a vision, someone who understands what wins in the modern NBA and is willing to build that vision out over years and years as a culture builds within connection and again, synergy with the coaching staff to make sure you're on the same page as you build a basketball culture for the future. And until they do that, until Jeannie Buss empowers a basketball mind and not a buddy of hers, it's going to continue to be an issue. Anyway, I'm off my soapbox. Next question. Does increased three-point volume also correlate with higher offensive rebounding rates? If so, do you think the greater chance for a second possession is a meaningful stat when it comes to shot selection? So interestingly enough, I just wanted to do like a little tiny bit of research for this one. Top 10 in three-point volume right now per 100 possessions. Boston, Charlotte, Chicago, Golden State, Brooklyn, Minnesota, San Antonio, Phoenix, Oklahoma City, Miami. Top 10 in offensive rebound percentage. So percentage of their own misses that they recover. Houston, Toronto, Memphis, Charlotte, Atlanta, Utah, Portland, Golden State, New Orleans, Orlando. So Charlotte and Golden State are the only two teams that are on both lists. So again, I haven't done any sort of substantial research, but on the surface level, it looks like there's not much correlation between high volume three-point teams and offensive rebounding. So again, there are going to be data departments in some of these teams that could do more detailed research, but that's just my like kind of quick research there that looks like there's not too much of a correlation. This is a fun one. Hi to Jason and to the rest of your team. My driving buddy, you're the voice that keeps me sane driving home after work and all of this chaotic traffic every day now. I've been following your channel since you began with the volume and just a fan of your love and knowledge to basketball. Plus, we are probably very close in age, so our point of view often align easily. Love the show. Keep up the good work. Thanks again for the kind words. My question is about a basketball scheme that has recently been brought up by the Thinking Basketball channel. They recently uploaded a video talking about how the Grizzlies are not running pick and roll, but instead having their ball handler driving into space and then everyone just rotating around accordingly. Draymond Green also mentioned it in some post-game interview, said that he almost never has seen it before. I have seen some comments saying it was an early-level college basketball concept, but myself never been following college basketball scene, so I also never saw this either. Do you know anything of this scheme? If so, would love to hear your thoughts on this. So, okay, let's go quickly into just some of the realities here. So the Grizzlies do still run screens. They just don't do it nearly as much. To give you an idea, the Grizzlies run only 20 pick and rolls, including passes, per game. That's the fewest in the NBA. To give you an idea, the Cavs run the most in the league. They run 44 per game. 27 of the 30 NBA teams run at least 31 ball screens per game. Golden State, Denver, and Memphis are the only three teams to run less than 30, but Golden State and Denver are both top 5 in handoffs. Memphis is dead last in handoffs too. So to put it very simply, Memphis runs the fewest two-man on-ball possession, like two-man game on-ball possessions in the league. So like DHOs, ball screens, things along those lines. They do it the least, okay? The way that Memphis's offense works, it's a lot. They do run some screening action. They run a lot of off-ball action. Like a lot of times they'll have John Morant bring the ball up the right side of the floor and they'll be running a set to get Desmond Bane coming off of something, right? And then again, they do still run ball screens. They run 20 of them a game. Again, not as frequently as other NBA teams, but they do still do it, right? The primary method of initiation for Memphis centers around dribble penetration. This is unique to the superstar that leads this team. The vast majority of players in the NBA have no chance keeping Ja Morant in front. Why do we run ball screens? This is an important kind of like separate topic here. Why do we run ball screens? We run ball screens to give our ball handlers an opportunity to get downhill. That's literally why we do it. And so if I can get downhill without a ball screen, then there's just there's no need for me to get a screener involved. Right? That's the idea. It's a Ja Morant superpower. But the interestingly enough, though, it is a system that they run with all their units. Like they'll do it with their bench groups too, and they'll do it with all the players. Like if Scottie Pippen Jr. catches on the top, he's just going to look to attack off the dribble. If Marcus Smart catches on the top, he's just going to look to attack off the dribble. And then from there, everybody in their off-ball positioning just stays fluid. So like if Ja Morant is driving off the left wing and Desmond Bane's in the corner and, Jaren Jackson is kind of flashing to the high post and there's, let's call it Jalen Wells in the left wing. As Ja is driving, Desmond Bane will cut out of the corner along the baseline to try to make himself available under the basket. Jalen Wells will wheel to the left corner. Everyone just kind of stays in motion around because of the simple fact that it's difficult to track man and ball, right? As a help side defender, if you're standing still, it's easier for me to track the ball handler. If you're in motion, it's harder for me to track the ball handler. You get the point, right? So the gist of it is they basically just get the defense in rotation via Ja Morant and everyone else's, but mainly Ja Morant's dribble penetration, and they play drive and kick basketball out of it, right? Other teams have to use screening actions or different methods of attack to try to get the defense in rotation. But it still is more or less the same concept. It's just you don't need to screen as much when Ja Morant is involved. They are really, really good at getting dribble penetration too. Like they generate the most spot up opportunities in the league. Why? Because they get great dribble penetration. Although they are terrible at converting those spot up possessions, as we talked about in the Monday show. They're also fourth in baskets made off of cuts per game. The interesting thing is like they're fifth in offense, but I checked it for resilience. They're only 11th in offense against the top 10 defenses, which is not bad, but not as good as they are in the large sample. But then they also like went into Boston and beat the Celtics. And like, if you were asking me like, oh, Jason, what's the type of problem that this type of offense could run into, is like, what if you get a team that really can contain the ball well? And the two teams I would look at there are Boston and Oklahoma City, right? Boston and Oklahoma City, lots of good perimeter defenders. What if they just contain the ball? Memphis went into Boston and got a win. They haven't played Oklahoma City yet, but I would like to see Oklahoma City in this type of matchup as well, because Oklahoma City, it's like, what if Kason Wallace is on the ball and there's just a bunch of athletes around him and they're just good at containing, and then it becomes an issue, right? And the other thing too is like, if you've got really good rim protection, Memphis just has a lot of guys that aren't good shooters. And so you can sit in the paint and you can do a lot to kind of offer help in those sorts of situations too. So like, it's one of those things where like I'd like to just see a lot more of it before I take any sort of strong stance, but it is a very interesting play style. I played a bunch of different offensive systems in my time playing organized basketball. Ironically, the only time I ever played in a system like this was my last year playing in high school. So my senior year, our head coach at that time, Tim Batten, he had a system. We had a guard, a really, really fast guard. And we played a drive and kick system. So we would do 4 out with a big in the opposite block. And then basically like there was no screen. It was like just beat that dude off the dribble and we play drive and kick. And that was what we ran for the majority of that season. But it's not something I ran in any other place that I played. And kind of like what Draymond was saying, it is a pretty uncommon offensive style. But the reason why is because not many teams have Ja Morant. And so most of the time you just kind of feel comfortable with your best ball, like on ball defenders being able to contain the ball well enough to kind of render that type of offense useless, right? But like Ja Morant's a superpower. It's kind of like how, it's kind of like with teams like Denver. They play a very different offensive style than most teams in the league because they have Nikola Jokic, and Nikola Jokic just unlocks a different capability that other teams don't have, right? But very, very interesting question, and I'll continue to try to build out my understanding of Memphis's offense and try to help break it down for you guys over the course of this season. There's a large portion of Warriors fans who have been calling for Steve Kerr to be fired ever since the 2022-2023 season struggles. I'm not among them, but I am curious to hear your take on his role in the Warriors' struggles ever since they won the championship in 22. His 3-guard lineups, favoritism of older players like Chris Paul and Klay Thompson, and unwillingness to play bigs or younger players have all been called into question. Where are you on Steve Kerr and the job that he's done coaching the Warriors the last 3 seasons, including this one? Thanks. Love the show and always appreciate you answering our mailbag questions. Thanks for the support and thanks for the kind words. So here's the thing. I'm always hesitant to get on the coach when there are roster flaws. Like, we have to call it what it is. This roster does have issues as it pertains to shot creation beyond Steph and interior size, right? That's just the reality of this roster. So like Steve Kerr is always trying to confront those problems, right? And whenever there's a flawed roster and you have a basketball mind trying shit to try to fix it, he's going to have to take some risks. And it's very easy to play the results and be like, I don't think this is working, or like, man, he should have just done this instead. And it's like, you don't think he's sitting there thinking like, man, I don't know what to do. Let's try this. This might work. But it's like he could have tried something different and it might have failed just as much simply because there are some roster limitations there. Like there are things that I disagree with. For instance, like I do think that playing a super, super long rotation can affect players' rhythm sometimes. I think that's a realistic criticism. But at the same time, there's a flip side to that coin, which is the Warriors compete really, really hard and play really, really fast. And it's just hard to ask a 9 or 8 man rotation to do that compared to an 11 or 12 man rotation, right? Like there's 2 sides to that coin. And so it's a more complicated discussion than just Steve Kerr's doing the wrong thing. I disagree with benching Draymond. I understand why they did it, to try to open up opportunity for Jonathan Kuminga with the starters and hopefully inflate his trade value. Here's the thing. You got your starters got your butts kicked by the Mavericks starters, and in large part because they're 5 best players on the floor and you have one of your best players sitting on the bench. That's a decision that I disagree with. But also, smart coaches have a tendency to audible and do what they need to do when the time calls for it. I don't think Steve Kerr is going to leave Draymond on the bench for much longer. I wouldn't be surprised if he's back starting within the next game or two. I don't think that's a decision he's going to stick to. To me, it's totally okay for coaches to try shit when they're dealing with flawed rosters. To me, it's about adaptability. Can you accept when something's not working and make an audible, right? Like, to JJ Redick's credit for the Lakers, he's been trying this switching scheme. I really like switching as a fundamental basketball concept, but in order to switch, because there's so many disadvantageous rebounding situations and disadvantageous ISO post-up situations, you kind of need like 5 guys that are all pretty big and athletic. And the Lakers just aren't big and athletic, so they probably shouldn't be switching. They should probably be keeping Anthony Davis and LeBron James at the rim as much as possible. But to JJ Redick's credit, he tried it for 20-something games, and he's been slowly kind of tweaking the system and going back to traditional ball screen coverages where they're asking their guards to chase over the top. It's like, again, you try shit. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. You have to be adaptable. And the bottom line is like, let's simplify, I should say, this Steve Kerr issue down to one topic. How did you guys feel about the Warriors going into the season? Like, did you guys view the Warriors as a team that was going to be in the upper portion of the conference all season? Because they've had, relative to expectations, they've had a pretty damn good start to the season. Like, if I told you they're going to be 14-11 before the season, you wouldn't have been surprised at all. You would have been like, this feels like a 14-11 roster, right? But because they got off to a hot start and kicked everybody's butt for a few weeks at the start of the season, it like tweaked everybody's expectations, and now we think they're underachieving. But the truth of the matter is just start ranking players around the league. Every team out there has 2 or 3. Any team that's competing for a title has 2 or 3 players that are in the top 30, 40 players in the league, and the Warriors have 1. It's just really, really difficult to compete on a talent level in that sort of circumstance. Hey, Jason, love your show. I'm going to try to rapid fire through these because I got to be out of here in just a few minutes. Hey, Jason, love your show. What does OKC's style of defense look like against an offense like the Celtics? The Thunder play an aggressive ball pressure, passing lane steals, blitzing style of defense. Boston is at their best when teams blitz and or double and put 2 on the ball, which allows them to drive and kick and get defenses into rotation. I've thought about this a lot too, and I'm really, really excited to watch OKC versus Boston. I was looking, there's one coming up in like the next like month or so. I think it's like in the next month or so, and it's like not even on national television, which is like crazy to me because that game just needs to be on national television. But we'll be covering it when the time comes. But yeah, that's the thing. OKC's really aggressive, and they kind of like to be in rotation. Boston is one of the best teams in the league at beating teams that are in rotation, so it's going to be kind of like a unstoppable force versus immovable object. Let's see what happens. But I'll definitely get into great detail on that game when we finally get to see it. Jason, why do you insist Jokic is the best player in the world, even though Giannis demonstrates the same ability to pass and play make, is a better scorer, is better off ball offensively, is an elite ball handler, and is eons better defensively? I know it's hard to admit you're wrong, but there's literally no case for Jokic or Giannis. Metrics are not a reliable way to evaluate player performance. With all due respect, I just disagree with about everything you said. He does not pass as well as Jokic, not even close. He doesn't play make as well as Jokic, not even close. He's not a better scorer than Jokic. Jokic is a much better scorer, in my opinion, especially when things slow down in the half court. Jokic is a much better off-ball offensive player. Jokic, I would argue, is a better ball handler too, although I can at least see that one closer. The one thing I agree with you is, yeah, you're right. Giannis is eons better than Jokic defensively, but I think I disagree with just about everything else you said. Another great vid, Jason. What do you think Detroit needs to be a top 5 team in the East? Their ceiling looks higher with Thompson back in the lineup. Would you be targeting a stretch forward or more high motor center to pair with Ivy and Cunningham? Did a little bit of Pistons talk in the show on Tuesday morning, so you guys, Pistons fans, will want to get back over and see that. The big thing that I'm looking at here is I want upgraded versions of Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. That game against the Heat is such a great example of what happens when you put aggressive shooting next to Cade. Cade is just so good at hunting shooters. He stole that game by just finding the hot hand and Tim Hardaway Jr. over and over and over again, right? So it's one of those things where, like, if you go into the draft and you start looking for off-ball scoring, like 6'7" to 6'9" wings that defend, rebound, and can knock down an open shot, but like aggressively knock down an open shot, those are the kinds of guys that are going to really raise the ceiling of this group. And it kind of coincides with their plans, right? Like upper lottery draft picks, that's where you get like star prospects, right? But in that mid lottery, in that like 7 to 15 range, that's where you can find some pretty high level role players. That's where Detroit needs to start hunting for that type of off-ball talent. Would winning the NBA Cup solidify their game for regular season MVP for Giannis or SGA? Or is that a non-factor and it will likely not outmatch the Joker? Here's the thing, it's going to be a total season case, but there's no doubt that an MVP for Giannis or Shea would be a feather in that cap when the time comes. 2 more quick ones. A bit of a random question based on the video, but the Spurs currently have exactly a 500 record, but aren't even in the play-in. As a Spurs fan, I would like to know, would it be better for them to have a round of playoff experience or a first-round draft pick this year? In general, I'm a big believer in building basketball culture, meaning like it would absolutely be better for you to try to win and try to get into the playoffs and try to compete, even if you don't think you can win the title, because it's part of the culture. Winning has to be the number one goal. It needs to be the entire identity of your franchise, and the only way you can do that is if you intentionally go about the process of winning every single day, even if it might hurt your draft position by 1 or 2 points. It's one thing if you're not going to make the playoffs and you're not even close to making the playoffs and you're just trying to tank. But like if you're on the fringe, I always think you should go for it. Last question. What are your thoughts on the new All-Star game format? Is the All-Star game dead? And for those of you guys who didn't see, they're going to split the guys into 3 teams and then let one of the young teams play. And then they're basically going to do like semifinals and finals games to 40. It's a good idea, but it's only going to work if the guys compete. So whether or not they compete will end up being the determining factor. And there's only one way to find out. We got to try it. I'm not optimistic, but we'll see when we get there. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting me and supporting the show. We will be back on Monday morning with our power rankings. I will see you guys then.